Pakyuke Kudandagelu Pakyuke Sungdandage Nga Pakyuke Tugdandage Tenyerme Chikto Chinge Lo Makyuke Kudandage Makyuke Sungdandage Nga Makyuke Tugdandage Tenyerme Chikto Chinge Lo Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Muni Swaha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakya Muni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Muni Swaha. Cominciamo con le preghiere.
We'll begin with the prayers, starting with the recitation of the Heart Sutra that you can follow on the screen. That purpose is to eliminate all interferences, any interference that there may be, our lack of concentration, for example, inner distractions, uncertainties, doubts, envy, jealousy, any kind of emotion that takes us away from this present moment where we are here and now. Let's allow this first moment to help us eliminate all these interferences. And then there's the mantra of Singamukha, and then we will clap our hands 3 times, and we imagine that any kind of interference or negativity that there may be, to be able to receive teachings correctly, assimilate the teachings correctly, all those interferences are eliminated. And then we will recite the request for the blessings of the lineage. These are the same prayers that have been recited for centuries when giving these Lam Rim teachings.
Papaya kunjo sumla cha thealoya dike dake tepa tuchi na chumdende gyalpo kap chago pumbori la gelongi gendun chimbo dang chanjo sembe gendun chimbo dang taba chiktu shote Tse chumdende samu nangwa she chao chogi namrangi tinge zinla nyombra shu so yang tse chanchu semba chimbo pakpa chenre zi wang sheragi parutu chimba samu choba nila nambra tash pumbo ngabo teta layang rang shingi tomba nambra tao Tene sangye gi tu tsedan denpa sharipu chanchu sempa sempa chimbo pakpa chenrezi wancho dike che me so rigi pu kangla la sheragi parutu chimba sam Chepara depa te chitra labra cha tike che me padang chanchu sempa sempa chimbo pakpa chenrezi wanchu ki Tsedan demba shara tati pula dike che me so shari pu rigi puwa rigi pumo kangla la sheragi parutu jimba samo chepa chepa chepra deba te ditra nambra tawra chate pumbo ngabo teta kyang rang shingi tomba nambra yandakbra jesu tao so tomba o tomba ni so Sule tomba ni shema yin, tomba ni le kya, so shema yin no tishin tu tsorwa dan dushe dam, duch nambra sheba nama tomba o sharipu, tedra che tamche tomba ni te tseni meba ma keba ma gakpa trima me, trima dan trawa triwa meba kangwa meba o, Shari pu teta we na tomba nila su me tsorwa me duche na me nambra sheba me ming me nawa me na me che me lu su me dra me ti me ro me rekcha me che me to migi kam me ba ne Yigi kamme yigi nambra shebe kamge pardo yame to marikpa seba me ban gashe sebe pardo yame to teshin tu dunge wadang kunchun wadang gokpadang la me yeshe me topa me mato payame to Sharipu teta wena janchu semba nam topa mebe chir Sheragi parutu jimbala tenchi net Semla tripa me chin trakpa me te chinchi lon Dene nyange le depe tarchi Tu sundu nambra shube sange tamche kyan Sheragi parutu jimbala ten Lana meba yan dabra zobe janchu tu ngombra zoba sangye so te tawe na sheragi parutu jimbe nga rikpa chimbe nga lana mebe nga minyam pada nyambe nga dunge tamche raptu shivra chebe nga mizun pena dembra shebra chate sheragi parutu jimbe nga meba ya taya ta gate gate Samgate podi swaha Sharipu janchu semba semba chimbu tedra sheragi parutu jimba samola labra chao Tene chumdende tingezi Tele shende janchu semba semba chimbu papa chenrezi wanjo la lekso she jawa chingne Lekso lekso rigipu tete shino rigipu tete shinte Chitra kyogi temba shindu sheragi parutu jimba samola chebra chate Deshin sheba namkyan jesu irango Chumden degi dike che ka tsene tsedan temba sharatati budan janju semba chenbo papa chenrezi wanju dan tam chedan kor tedan Hadam midan lama yindan trisara chebe jikne iran Chumden degi sumba lang ombra do Kala chebe neche tamba na ngweshe tsudru ngawe tudoba chim Druba pola maye pushinsi Nesung kandro tsola cha tse lo Akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe Akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe Akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe Akka samaranza shatara samaraya Akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe Akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe Akka samaranza shatara samaraya Akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe Akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe Akka samaranza shatara samaraya Akka samaranza shatara samaraya Akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe akka samaranza shatara samaraya pe. Tayata gate gate paragat para samgate podhisvoha. Papa kuncho sumge kai dempe topchir dog par gyurchi me par gyurchi shivar gyurchi rabtu shivara gyurchi. Drage parche mi tumbe chore ngemba tamche shanti kuru yesvoha. Geri tongra gechu shiwada mitu nebe kendan chawada. Tumba drupchen punsun tsogyurupe. Trashi de kyan tendir dele sho. Chiediamo le benedizioni.
We ask for the blessings of all the masters of the lineage, the line of transmission from which these teachings have arrived to us in an uninterrupted way, starting from Buddha Shakyamuni.
Kuson toge ngodro tsedo so, kuson toge ngodro tsedo so, Jemba nyangme tumba chumdende, gyatsa tamba chetsu mi bangom, gyawe longden pakpa tome sha, sange jansen sumla solwa de, sange jansen sumla solwa de, zamlin kebe tsugen yigi nye, ume lamne pakpa namdre de, Tebe sarne tsumba namdre de, jikde mikche sumla solwa de, jikde mikche sumla solwa de, mechung otsara ne gyuro chogi de, samu lamgi gyuchan dulwe de, labchen chepe tergyo namnanze, drowe tsala sumla solwa de, drowe tsala sumla solwa de, lamche shirchin gedze sensan sha, gyawe menga kunzin kusali, Drogun tsewe jinzin gewa chen, drowe tepun sumla sowa de, janju tula nganye sirlimpa, shinda chimbo seze marmeze, lamsa seze tumba rinpoche, tembe sokshin sumla solwa de, tembe sokshin sumla sowa de, mawa dame drenjo shakyeto, gyawe kenra kundu chambe yang, Samu tunse pakcho ludru sha, mawe tsugen sumla solwa de, mawe tsugen sumla sowa de, pakpe gomba silze dawa tra, tese tuwo rikpe kuchu che, gyase rikpe kuchu nibe sha, rikpe wangcho sumla solwa de, rikpe wangcho sumla sowa de, Tendre samu chishin sikpa ye, shinda chimbo sulzi marmeze, Lamsa seze tumba rinpoche, zamling gengyur nila solwa de, zamling gengyur ni. Neljuro wanjo palden gomba wa, samu tingzin tembe nilsu pa, duwe denu kunze tangma pa, tako drume sumla sowa de, takoba drume sumla solwa de, tsumbe druba lurlen namsen sha, tambe chila namka gyabo dang, Jikden chöge pangbe singe san, gyase sangbe shabla solwa de. Janjo togi drogun pushin sel hakpe laye jeson chinge lam. Nikdu drowa drembe shenyen cho, namka gensen shabla solwa de. Namka gensen shabla solwa de. Gyawe dongso shenyen poto wa, namcho drenda drawe sharawa. Chancho tuge kababa cheka wa, drowe rekon sumla sowa de. Solwa de alungdo ngada chanse chipu pa, time lunge wanju kebe cho. Kamson drowe gombo rimbo che, neden chimbo sumla solwa de. Neden chimbo sumla sowa de. Namda tsulri ngedan sangchen pa, duwa bumde ngada tsona pa. Chunga gyatso tarsu mundra pa, drowe drimba sumla solwa de, drowe drimba sumla solwa de, sabjin gyache chola nganye pe, kalden drowa kunge kyapsu gyur, trinle sambo tempa gyetse pa, pande lame shabla solwa de. solwa de drube wangju chimbu tsudin para shenyen tsushin tenze shunu tekcho lamge gyujang gunsha gyawe sebo sumla solwa de gyawe sebo sumla solwa de mechu yönden zözin sangye tambe chinla namga gyabo dang jikden choge pangbe senge sang gyase sambo shabla solwa de gyase sambo shabla solwa de jancho toge drogun pushin se lakbe nikdo drowa drembe shenyen cho namka gyanzen shabla solwa de namka gyanzen shabla solwa mingme tsewe terchen cherezi drime kanche kebe tsugen tsungka pa losan trakpe shabla solwa de Shabla solwa de drube wanjo chambe gyatso dan kedru mawe nima gelepe nyingyo dampa tsunzendo dame lama sumla sowa de sunjo kunye chugi dorje dan kusung ongyur lundo ngada sange yeshe sha kedru chimbo sumla solwa de kedru chimbo sumla solwa de losan chugi gansen zimbe je teye tukse kunjo gansen sha lamsa seze losan yeshe de jitsun lama sumla solwa jitsun lama sumla solwa de tupten peze ngawa jamba da teye tukse losan nyindra sha gyatso tabo yunten taye nga tinchen lama sumla solwa de sowa de losan yeshe temba rabge je lodro sambo drogun namdro ze losan gyawe chutsu chinke pa tsungme lama sumla solwa de tsungme lama sumla sowa kelsan namre shibe londo ten shedru nige zinla datrewa kadrin nyangme tsawe lama la gosung guba chimbo sowa de gosung guba chimbo sowa de mangdo dambra sharwe kilgorge rimni chebe rida sunye se tenzin kedru shabla solwa de tenzin kedru shabla sowa de tunsun kyamne malu dube ko losan jambe lekshe druke son lapson gyudre lundro gyatso tu tinchen trube kula solwa de tinchen trube kula sowa de jamba tsulden laso pangnorgi tugyo lektam galten zimbe tso namshi tinle gyatso kuchen kyo yongya jetsun lamara sowa de yongya jetsun lamara solwa de losan gyalwa kunge yeshe ni chikdo trime galten zimbe tso ramjang kilgor gyatso trudug tinchen lame shabla solwa locho sambo pagyo trashi pa tuche tembe tinle yarngoda peke drolo zambe zebache pande lame shabla solwa de pande lame shabla solwa de rabjan sonrav kunla tawe mi kesan tarpara drube jungcho tsewe kyobe tabge zeba ye sezen shenye namla solwa de seze shenye namla solwa de pande lame namba tarpa la keche tsamya lokta mi keshi chitze lekpra tongwe mugugi lame chinla semla jukprash lame chinla va semla jukpar sho. Dopo aver chiesto le benedizioni di tutti i maestri del lignaggio, chiediamo le benedizioni per realizzare ognuno dei passi necessari nel sentiero graduale verso l'illuminazione. Yunde jungne tsurimun gyatso che tsushin temba lamge tsawaru lekpara tongne beba tumayi guba chenpo tembra jingelo guba chenpo tembra jingelo lenche nyebe dawe tensande shindu nyega tunche shigyurane ninsen kundu nimbo lembelo gyunche meba kewra jingelo gyunche meba kewra jingelo lukso yowa chui chubrushi nyurdo jikpe chiwa dremba da shiwe jesu ludan timashi Karna ledre chishin changwa la ngepa tempo nyene nyepe tso trashi trawa namkya pongwa dam getso tada drupra cheba la takto pakdan dembra chingelo takto pakdan dembra chingelo chebe mingo dunga kunge go yite miru sibe punsogi nyemi ringne tarpa dewala tunye chimbo Kyora jingelo namda samba teyi changba yi drendan shishin payo chimbo yi tembe tsawa sosro tarpa la druba nimbo chebra jingelo druba nimbro chebra jingelo rangni sitso lungwa chishin to magyuro drowa kungyan tedra wara tongne drowa drolwe kurkerwe Chancho simcho chongra jingelo, chancho simcho chongra jingelo, simsan kekya tsutrin namsola, komba mena chancho midru par, lekpra tongne gyase dombala, tsumba trakpo lopra jingelo, tsumba trakpo lopra jingelo, lokpe yula yenwa shiche ching, yanda tunla tsushin chepa ye, shine lakto sungdo drewe lam, Nyurdu gyula kevra chingelo, nyurdu gyula kevra chingelo, tumo lamja nudu gyurpa na, tekpa kungi chugyu dorjete, kesan kewo jungo tamba tera, dela nitu chukpra chingelo. Chingelo, tetse ngodru namni drube shin, namda tamze domba songba la, Chema mimbe ngeba nyegyurne sokdan dede songwara jingelo sokdan dede songwara jingelo tene gyude nimbo rimnigi nenama jishin tongne tsumbayi tunshi neljo chule miye wara tambe sunshi drubra jingelo tambe sunshi drubra jingelo tedra lamsa tumbe shenyendan tsushin drube drona shabdenshin Chida nange pardu chepe tso nyewra shiwra jinge labdu so kewa kundu yanda lama dan rame cheki pela longche chin sat dorje change kopa nyurtob sho dorje change kopa nyurtob sho Offerta del mandala.
That's the mandala offering. We make the request, sincere request, to receive the Lam Rim teachings, the stages of the graduated path to enlightenment.
Tramare ravaling shi ni de gyam sange shinto mi te Ulawarki Drokunam Dashin La Cho Parasho Yedam Guru Ratna Mindrala Kam Niryataya Sangye chedan tsogi chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi chushe gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupar sho sangye chodan tsoge chonamla jancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi chushe gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupara sho sangye chodan tsoge chonamla jancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki sangye drupara sho. Nel Buddha,
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment through the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo ya lai ke dan lu dan nu jin ke drupun dan da mi ke nam da drowa kuin ke janama che tsampa tam che ke to da ge che ten to. Buongiorno.
Good morning.
C'è un passaggio di un testo di Atisha,
There's a passage of a text from Atisha,
del XI secolo,
Atisha of the 11th century, who brought Buddhism to Tibet for the second, third time. There were other masters who brought who brought Buddhism to Tibet from India, and Atisha was one of those. Our lineage comes through Atisha. There was a moment where Atisha had spent a few years in Tibet. He needed to go back to India, and as he was saying goodbye to his disciples, among whom there was also the king of Tibet, it was really quite an intense moment. They didn't think they would see each other again. And then it happens that Atisha's not able to travel. There was a war, and he ended up spending the rest of his life in Tibet. But in that moment where he was leaving, Chanchup Ösa, he went to him and said, Master, before leaving, could you please give us one last teaching? And in that moment, he taught this teaching in verse, which gives the essence. So here I leave an essence, heart to heart, and he gave a very brief and beautiful teaching, and within that there was a passage, and giving a very simplified translation of that, not literal. He said, during the day we're distracted, and at night we sleep. The objects of knowledge are many, and soon we will die. And what happens is when we find ourselves in front of an opportunity, there's an enormous difference between having an opportunity and knowing how to make use of that opportunity, knowing how really to take advantage of that opportunity to the fullest. And when you go to see the life that we have conditions that are not easy to not obtain. It's said that for a sincere practitioner of Dharma, you need three main conditions, which are having the minimum necessary, materially speaking, not only materially, but also your body. You need to have who guides you spiritually correctly, and the third is wanting to practice. And no matter how strange it might seem, the first two, once you have the two, you take them for granted a little bit, like saying, oh, okay, I have marvelous conditions, physically, materially speaking. That I have. I have someone who guides me correctly on the path. I trust my spiritual guide. I rely on him, everything we saw before. And we think that that's enough. But that third condition, this desire to practice really, truly, it's something that we need to cultivate. It's not at all a given. Because what happens is we spend a large part of our life distracted by life itself. We have objects of desire to obtain, objects of aversion to get away from. We have the needs of our body. We have material things that we need to take care of. We need to work. We need to go shopping and buy groceries and cook and eat and digest and clean everything up. Then we need to rest, etc., etc. We use up a tremendous amount of energy for life itself. And there's nothing wrong with that. The main point is we are made up of, how can I say, it's a very simple characteristic, let's say. We are made up of habits. As Shantideva said in the Bodhisattva Charavatara, he said, there's nothing that's not easy once you're used to it. We're just made of habits, physically speaking and mentally speaking. If we go to see our body, it has an amazing ability to adapt, our mind as well. And the longer we live in a certain situation, the more we transform ourselves in that direction. I think that's clear. Our physical state today is the result of the habits of even our ancestors, where they lived, how they lived, etc., and added up to all the habits that we have created since we were little. We eat in a certain way. Our body adapts to that and transforms accordingly. Our mind, the same thing happens to our mind. Our mind is strongly based on habits. So what I do is what I become little by little. And what becomes important when we talk about making this life meaningful, we're making reference not to what we have, but how we transform as we live. A meaningful vacation, for example, is not about, it's not made from the beauty of the place we go or if we have fun or not. It's not about the cost of the vacation. It becomes meaningful. It becomes meaningful based on the transformation that occurred Did I have some kind of experience that transformed me positively? Am I a person that grew a little bit after that experience? Or were they experiences that just reinforced my bad habits? So, meaningful is looks more long term. We could, generally speaking, we could say that there are various situations. We can have three approaches: short term, mid term, and long term. My interpretation of this is this short term has to do with the now. So, what are my needs in this moment, in these next days, in this immediate future, these weeks, this present and immediate future? That's the short term. Midterm has to do with this life. Long term has to do with what transcends this life. It's difficult for us even to have objectives that are mid term. Normally, when we put in our energy, what are our reference points? We want to avoid the problems that we have now. What are the things that I don't like, that I don't want anymore? What are the things that I want to obtain? Because I project my happiness onto those things and I want to have them, right? I don't know. How often are we able to have a view that really transcends this present moment and looks further in the future? The classic example is eating. When we're in front of having to choose what to eat, most of the time, what pushes our choices, are they our immediate desires and needs, or a vision, a view that's more long term? Often, I'm hungry, I like that thing I don't like in this moment. If I eat this thing now, it will give me a stomach ache, so I won't eat it. But if there's something I like, but I know that long term that thing will hurt me, it's really a lot harder to not eat that thing. So what happens is the following. We have an opportunity that is unique. But if we don't learn how to recognize the opportunity that we have, the preciousness of where we are, and how difficult it is to obtain, how precious it is, our tendency would be to take advantage of the opportunities that we have. Is that clear? As it said also, even Proverbs that we have, when does one start giving value to to things? When you lose them, when you're about to lose them. So once it was there with me, you take for granted. When I start losing that thing, oh, how can I manage without? And it's very important to know how to give value to what has value when you have it, when it's present. Why? Because if we take for granted, then it will be difficult for us to make that condition meaningful, favorable. And for example, there's a person that I live with in my daily life. If I take for granted the presence of that person in my life, the tendency is, oh, it's nice, we go ahead, but I don't give the space to that person. When I really feel that it's not obvious, that when I don't take advantage, I don't take for granted the fact that that person is there, then I start giving more value to every moment. I take that relationship becomes more important. If there's something, if something is not right, I try to fix it right away. there's more intensity in living each moment, right?
Perciò
So
e la cosa interessante
what's interesting, I don't know if that's the right term, but in our life,
aspettare il momento
waiting for the moment where we receive the letter from the Lord of Death saying you are going to die. It's too late to use this life. It's never too late, but that would be really quite late to be able to use this life really meaningful, to say I really want to use this life in the best way possible. And one of the most important thing is to not take for granted the life that we have, the conditions that we have, the opportunity that we have in front of us.
questo
This is the basis to give us that necessary strength to transform ourselves in a positive way, to really practice the Dharma. Otherwise, what happens is we're there, we say, yes, the Dharma is marvelous, how wonderful if it would be to be without all these negative defilements. It would be marvelous to have a good level of concentration, to meditate well, reach a state of altruism and love, a state of peace. How wonderful, wonderful. In the meantime, I need to resolve this problem. I need to do this thing. I need to pay my bills at the end of the month. So I need to do this, that, and the other. So even when it, and then if the problem isn't money, it's about managing other things, as it's said in Tibetan. Things need owners, and owners need things, and things need owners. So I'm really using up all my energy. If we were to ask ourselves the various things in our life, how much time in how much energy in my lifetime, in my life, is used up by things?
non poco, no?
Quite a bit. We need to clean, we need to take care, protect, etc., etc.
Che va bene,
Which is fine. Once you have something, one should take care of it. But the main question is how many things do I have? And but the question is, this relationship that I have with things, how does it help me transform myself and grow as a person? Because when one moment ends, what was done, what was lived, I mean, that's ended, that's finished. But there's something that continues. This example of vacation, for example. We take a vacation, we go there, we organize a vacation, we go and see a specific place, we have different experiences. And at a certain point, we come back. When we come back home, what's left? The vacation's over. So we have bills from a credit card to pay, but what else? And the photos that we don't look at anymore. Maybe a couple of souvenirs we've taken home. What is left of that vacation? Ourselves. We went somewhere, we had an experience, we came back, and those experiences are over. But wherever there's interaction, there's transformation. So we live situations that transformed us. And so who am I after that experience? How did it transform me? What stays with us more than anything else after an experience? Our transformed being, both physically and mentally. Let's remember that body and mind always go together on a physical level, on a mental level, we transform according to the situations. And what counts more is not just what we live, but how that experience transforms us. That's clear, isn't it? So our tendency, and forgive me for saying it like this, is that by nature, and I include myself fully here, by nature we are lazy. By nature we really try to apply the law of minimum effort and maximum comfort. If there were a path towards enlightenment without effort, right away we would take it. What can I do to have that one? We have this tendency of imagining that the less effort that I have to put into something, the happier I'll be. We have this tendency to want to be comfortable. As Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charavattara, without suffering, there is no determination to want to get out of suffering. It's translated can be translated as without suffering, there's no renunciation. Let's remember that the term renunciation, nechung in Tibetan, it's nebar jungwa. Nebar means certainty, something that's definite. A jungwa means to emerge, to get out of something. So this certainty of being able to get out, to emerge. Sometimes we can even translate it as definite emergence. So emergence, not at all linked to emergency, but to get out of. But I can never desire to get out of something if I don't recognize that thing as being something negative. And so what happens is when in our life we're very taken by the daily things, by life itself, and there's nothing wrong with that other than the fact that one is trapped in the daily life, in a comfortable survival, and life goes by. And in the meantime, we're familiarized with those things that we lived and we did, with the emotions that we have had. There are moments where there can be situations in our life that are unpleasant, where we feel resentment or anger or injustice or feelings of jealousy. I mean, this happens, right? But soon we're going to die. Do we really want to familiarize ourselves with those things? We don't have a real control over what happens around us, but we have an ability to direct our thoughts and our actions. So my question is, do I have time to waste with jealousy or not? Maybe someone says that he does. Okay, that's a choice that you have. The real, how can I say, it's not the real problem, but let's say one of the difficulties is that we're not being able to see the preciousness of the opportunity that we have, and taking for granted the opportunity that we have. It becomes really difficult to do something to make it meaningful, to take advantage of that. And our tendency is to get lost in our daily life. What does that mean, to get lost in our daily life? We use our time, our energy, etc., with avoiding suffering and getting pleasures. in the immediate and short term. In this process of avoiding suffering and trying to get pleasures in a short term, what are we familiarizing ourselves with? I let you see for yourselves. We're made of habits, but also understood as we have this tendency to repeat what we already are. There was a scientific study that said about 95% of our thoughts are nothing other than the repetition of our previous thoughts. So we're boring. We have this tendency to go around the same things. I don't know if it's ever happened that you've just been fixated on something and you just stuck round and round. A little bit similar to when someone comes to us and complains about. I mean, there are some people when you see that person, you know what that person's going to be talking about, at least the category of things, right? We're not much different with ourselves. And we're there in a loop. To get out of this loop, to get out of our comfort zone is not easy. In other words, to act differently from our habits is difficult because going against the grain, against the current of the habit is very tiresome. Creating a new habit, when you getting rid of an old habit that requires energy and it's tiresome, even if it's a bad habit. One of the clearest example that I see is our diet. Even when we know that something is bad for us, and we have a direct experience that it's bad for us, but we're used to that. I mean, how difficult is it to change? It's so difficult. So what happens is, to be able to get out of that moment, to allow ourselves to get out of this comfort zone, put energy into creating healthy, positive habits, virtuous habits, and abandon those bad habits, that requires a lot of energy. And to do this, we need two inner states that are at the basis. One is recognizing the preciousness of this opportunity that we have. And the second is to generate this sense of urgency. When we have something and we know how to recognize how that thing is unique and precious, we don't take it for granted. It's like, I want to meet someone. I wait for years and years to have that meeting. I'm finally able to meet that person. I'm together with that person. I don't know how long that meeting's going to last. It's a unique experience, and I've been waiting for such a long time. It's so difficult. And then I'm in front of that person. I say, "Oh, just a minute. I'm still looking at my Instagram." Or one is thinking about something else or not giving importance to that moment. And at a certain point, the person says, "Well, your time is out." And you say, "Oh no, I was going to ask you this, that, and the other." "Well, I'm sorry. Your time is over, and you're not able to do anything." If we're not able to recognize how this life is precious, but not on a conceptual level, but feel it, our tendency is to do what Atisha said during the day. We're distracted. Distracted by what? It doesn't mean that we spend our days, like daydreaming, looking up. I remember a book that, as a child, that we had at home, and Strugelpet in German. It was a just German book about this boy who was He was always like with his head in the clouds at so, like, for example, at the table, because he was always a little bit confused and he wanted to use a napkin and clean his mouth, and he just took the whole tablecloth. We're not distracted in that sense. We're distracted by, we're distracted from what is really important. And we can be very busy with many, many things, but we're distracted from what makes this life meaningful. We're distracted in our daily life from our own path of transformation, this constant training, this with awareness. I don't know if this is clear to you. So I don't have time to be there. So someone could say, I don't have time to watch my mind and change my habits. I need to work. I need to look at my emails. I need to check the news. And then every once in a while, I listen to Lama. Every once in a while, I meditate a little bit and reflect. And that's already a lot that I'm able to look inside myself and try to change my habits. That means being distracted.
Non essere distratti.
Not being distracted means that I have a level of inner awareness present in my daily life where I recognize that the actions that I do, the reactions that I have, are transforming me. I try to act in a certain way that is coherent with who I want to become and who I want to be. Someone could say, Lama, that's really tiresome. Yes, but the opposite is also tiring. So during the day we're distracted, and at night we sleep. The way the mind familiarizes itself during the night follows how we spent our days and how we fall asleep. So if I spend my day full of resentment, the mind stays in that loop even while we sleep. So Letizia said, during the day we're distracted, at night we sleep. The objects of knowledge are many. The things to learn, the things to do, the things to put our attention on. I mean, this is in the 11th century. I always think, what would Atisha say now in this 21st century? 2026 in Italy, what would he say? He would put his hands through his hair that he didn't even have. What would he say? So distracted. So these objects of knowledge are many things to learn, things to do. And soon we're going to die. And dying is not the problem. The problem is getting to that moment of death without having made this life meaningful, without having developed something healthy, without having assured ourselves a positive continuity after death. So, what is the antidote? Along our spiritual path, a fundamental point is, how can I say?
Esistono diversi approcci possibili.
There are different possible approaches. We can say there's an approach of a curious one, the tourist. There's the approach of an amateur, and then there's the approach of the professional. The tourist, the curious one, is the one who gets somewhere, looks around, takes what he likes, takes a couple pictures, feels part of that place after having taken a couple selfies, and then goes. So he's there in the summertime, but in the winter, um, the winter goes somewhere else. He sees the place, the beautiful time of the year, but he likes that place. He goes back every once in a while. This is how tourists are. Every once in a while, I read something. I take the things I like. I do a meditation here and there, and I'm happy with that. But I'm not really putting myself in the game. The approach of a amateur is like, is this so where the person doesn't live in that city, doesn't live in that place, but buys a house there. I have a commitment with that place. I go on vacation. Um, I have this commitment to go there on vacation. I spend um, time there sometimes, but I'm not always there. That's when you get close to the spiritual path and you start putting yourself in the game, but there's a very clear division between your own life and your spiritual life. There's your life with the family and your life and your fun and with your family, and then there's your spiritual life where you meditate or you go on pilgrimage, do retreats, but it's all wonderful. But one thing is one thing, and one thing is one thing, and another thing is another thing. There's a very net separation. And then there are those actually who, so on one side, they use this term, it's not the right term, but let's say this mundane life, maybe an intense mundane life. And to compensate, there are other moments where number one is the completely dedicated spiritual being, hours of meditation and deeply studies and recites millions of mantras. But then when I'm on the other side, I do the complete opposite. The, this can also be part of the amateur approach. So there's an approach. Let's say that the approach of this of spirituality is not totally integrated into one's life. And following the same analogy, the professional is not the tourist, is not the one who has a second house there, but is the one who actually lives in that place. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Everything that's part of living there. That person incorporates. And so when the practice is not when I sit down to meditate, it's not what I do when I go to the center to receive teachings or when I go on pilgrimage. The Dharma practice is something that is integrated in every moment of my life. Doesn't matter if I'm at home with my family, if I'm at work. Everything that I do is part of an inner process of transformation. And I try in my best way to do everything that I do with awareness that directs myself to what I want to become. It's a full-time job, 24/7. And this is an approach to do it well. It requires this awareness of the opportunity that we have. And this is where we've reached. Because after having relied correctly on a spiritual guide, it said, okay, now that we rely correctly on a spiritual guide, now we have to follow the path. And so here,
viene detto come praticare gli stadi dell'addestramento mentale dopo essersi affidati a una guida spirituale.
So after having
Ricordiamoci proprio il termine utilizzato è addestramento mentale.
we're talking about mind training, after relying on a spiritual guide. So, because we transform according to the according to the experiences we have. So, either we transform ourselves with awareness, or we just end up reacting without any kind of awareness. Here we're at the stages of how to train your mind after having relied on the teacher. So everything we do with our body, everything that we eat, etc., that I can train my body, or I can also transform my body according to the reactions that I have. So with awareness or without, and the same thing happens with our mind. So our starting point is I want to train with awareness. The first thing necessary is to take full advantage of this human life. And here we use this term that I don't know, how can I say, more than a precious human life, rebirth. It's about taking advantage of the opportunities that we have, which doesn't even mean being just a human being. I don't think there's anything particularly special about being a human being. But there are some conditions that are extremely special, and being a human is also one of those conditions. So the first thing is understanding what are the conditions that I have. Because if we find ourselves in a state where there's a lot of suffering, constant suffering, pain, hunger, thirst, danger, etc., do we have the time, the space, the inner space to change, to develop the awareness of our actions? Difficult. The example that I give, for example, if we put our hand in the hinge of a door and then you start closing the door, I mean, it hurts. And you just keep closing the door and pushing the door, and then we hear crack, crack, crack. Maybe some blood starts coming out. And as we're there with our hand stuck in the door, can we say, okay, now we're going to meditate on compassion? Or let's recognize that selfishly speaking, it's better to be altruistic, and we reflect on the gratitude towards all beings. What's our priority in that moment? To get our hand out of the door, take away that pain. That's our priority. And what happens if that next to us there's someone pushing the door, and we're able to actually reach that person physically? We'll try to use all means possibly to get rid of our hand from the door. When we're in a situation of great suffering, our priority is to get out of that suffering. If someone is in the middle of hunger, the priority is eating, nothing else matters. If someone is in the middle of extreme heat or cold, the priority is to avoid those sufferings. In Tibetan is Deljor, Talwa, Jorwa. Talwa, which means having time. Having time means being free from certain situations that wouldn't allow me to have inner space for a spiritual path. Because there are situations that when you're in the middle of them, they're so strong that the absolute priority is to get out of that situation. except people who have such a level, of spiritual spiritual dedication. But there are very, very few who are able to live extreme situations in a positive way. There are very few, unfortunately. I remember once when I came back from a trip in Brazil. I was in Malpensa. I think some of you have had this experience where you would get to Malpensa and there are never any carts for the luggage. Now you can have them. You actually need to pay for them. One of the very few airports I've ever seen where you have to pay for a cart. But anyway, but there at the time, not even paying, could you find a cart. And so I got there one day and I took my luggage. And it was possible to take them without the cart a little bit. I saw a group of people who were waiting for these carts, people that were dressed very well, a kind of an air of people. They were very educated and they were kind and waiting. And there were about 20 of them, and 5 carts arrived. And a war broke out with the one who was pulling one and the other one was pulling another one. They were screaming profanities. I mean, they almost broke out in a fight. And I was watching. It seemed like a movie. And I asked myself, instead of carts, it was food. What would have happened? And this takes us to a fundamental point. I am not better than others. I have conditions that are better than most. How would I act if I were without food? I don't know, because I've never lived that. So the point here is, it's not that we have a situation where we're better than others. We're not better. We have an opportunity that's better than most others. But this doesn't necessarily mean that we're better than they are. It's how we take advantage of the situation, how we live this is not, we shouldn't take it for granted. So we have telwa, we have time, so bad things, negative things that unfortunately many people live, and we're free from those things. So that's this first part. We're free from being in the middle of a war. We're free from being tortured. We're free from extreme hunger, heat, or cold, just to name a few. And we have jorwa. We also have things that are not obvious, but that are also positive and help us. These are opportunities. So before we get into the traditional way of seeing this, that the 18 favorable conditions, let's just see a little bit how they are. Let's just look at this planet as human beings. How many human beings are on this planet? What is said today? 8 billion. 8 billion. It's said some people say 7, some people say 8. It doesn't change much. Of these 8 billion people, how many live under the poverty line, which means how many people have a hard time getting not to the end of the month, but to the end of the day? Are there many? A few? It's said that about 2.5 billion are under the poverty line. It's 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 crazy. It's crazy to think that there's an almost an infinite, an enormous number of people on this planet who wake up hungry and go to bed hungry. And even if they have the simplest of sicknesses, they don't have the means to cure themselves, to help themselves. And they, unfortunately, extreme poverty after brings, not always, but can bring also to violence. An example, um, it's not that someone living in extreme poverty is bad, but a friend of ours, Bernard Gesh, he did a lot of scientific research with the University of Oxford years ago regarding violence and food. And he went into one of the maximum security prisons in England, and they gave them capsules, supplements, let's say, with the minimum amount of the dosage of the right vitamins and minerals. And these supplements that were given to everyone, there were some were actually real and some were placebo. And what happened? The ones who took the real supplements, their violence actually diminished 33%. Those who who had the placebo, their behavior stayed the same. So even physically speaking, when our body doesn't have the necessary nutrients, the tendency is to be more reactive. So a person who eats badly, who doesn't have a way to nourish his body and basic needs, will have this tendency to be more reactive. And then there are marvelous people, regardless of the context. They're able to maintain perfect contact, but that's really the exception. Very often, I mean, there's a level of violence that's not indifferent. And there are so many people who live in this situation. And then there's also an enormous quantity of people, again, another 2.5 billion or 3 billion, they're just above the poverty line, which means that it's hard for them to get to the end of the month. Those who need to work so many hours, and if they stop working, they don't have food on the table. So it's what we saw during the COVID period. In a country like Brazil, the number of people living on the street increased incredibly, because when so many people didn't have their jobs anymore. They lost their homes. I mean, thousands of people. They lost everything. There are too many people who live in a precarious situation. When you live in a precarious situation like that, how inner space do you have to sit down with calm and meditate? Very little. Of course, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, it's very difficult. Then we have also an enormous quantity of people who materially speaking have the minimum necessary, so they don't need to use all of their energy with their own survival, a part but not all of it. There's not a constant worry about their survival. So we're talking here in Italy, for example, we have the great fortune to have public health care. And in many parts of the world, that doesn't exist. And so, I mean, in many parts of the world, not only is your survival not I'm not sure, but your health neither. I've friends who went to the United States, and when they got sick, um, I have friends, Indian friends, and when they got sick, they stayed sick, or they went back to India because they didn't have the means to take care of themselves. So here we even have the social means to take care of ourselves, but many don't have this. So there are also others who don't need to be constantly worried about their survival, but they become slaves of their own comfortable survival. What does that mean to be a slave? It means I live for that. I'm conditioned constantly with that. I'm conditioned by earning money, my social position, getting objects of desire, and it's hard for me to get out of that loop. If we look around, the people who have the minimum necessary, economically speaking, where their survival is not a constant worry, etc., that have the inner space to want to follow a sincere spiritual path. Is that the majority or the minority?
È la minoranza.
It's really the minority. And I don't know why, but here we find ourselves within that minority. I don't know why, in the sense that it's not that we have something special, that we're better off than others, that we are better than others, but we have conditions that are really quite particular and special. If we were to speak in percentage, what's the percentage of the people on this planet who have the minimum necessary, materially speaking? They don't need to worry about their survival, and if they got sick, they have the means to take care of themselves. They don't live in constant danger. They also don't have a state of sickness that's very progressed. They have their five senses that are working well. It's not a slave of mundane pleasures or money. They maybe they like, but they're not trapped to live for those things. And someone who wants to live his life meaningful and has these conditions, in other words, who has the minimum necessary materially, has the necessary means, has the minimum necessary materially speaking, has someone to guide them spiritually, and wants to actually follow this path. We're talking maybe zero comma or 0.000000. I don't know how many zeros I need to add here. We're talking percentage of the people on this planet who have these conditions. And sincerely, looking at each one of us and looking at myself too, I don't know how we all won this lottery. It's like the lottery. You play, and then somebody wins. Why did that person win and not the one next to him? So the question is not why did I win the lottery? The question is now what do I do with this prize? Because this life that we have, this opportunity that we have, it's extremely, extremely, extremely rare. And because it's rare, it doesn't mean it's good. Or there's some rare sicknesses, better not have them. But what makes what makes these conditions so special? These are conditions that give us the ability to give us continuity if it's used well. They allow us gradually to face our shadows, to develop our qualities, and reach gradually a state of joy, of of peace, and get out of the cycle of suffering of samsara. This is something. This is unique. So it's crazy when we really can see and realize that we are in this situation, the probability of having these conditions. Buddha Shakyamuni described it like this. Imagine a turtle who lives at the bottom of the ocean. It's a turtle that comes up for air every 100 years. Very long life. This turtle is blind and deaf. At the top, there on the ocean surface, there is a free buoy, golden buoy, a round buoy. What are the probabilities that when this turtle comes up for air, can put his life, it can put his neck through this round buoy? Comes up once every 100 years. This buoy is free, so it goes around and round, taken by the currents. I mean, it would be 0.000001%. I mean, we have that same probability. And when you hear that for the first time, it seems exaggerated. But if we add the fact that when one dies,
l'essere può rinascere in tante forme diverse.
the being can be reborn in many different forms. Let's look at the types of births. You can have animals, human animals, and non-human animals. I mean, we're mammals, so we're animals. If we add all these insects and animals, together with all the beings, into this percentage, I mean, how many more zeros do we need to add? Some people say, "Oh, well, it's not so bad to be to the life of an animal is not that bad." And on this planet, the animals, unfortunately, 99% of animals live in prisons, in concentration camps. Right? What most animals, they're hens, pigs, cows.
No? Poi ci sono I pesci.
And they're fish.
Sempre meno.
And the free animals are fewer and fewer. A being that is in that situation, what's the probability? The probability of a cow to develop himself spiritually. There's a point that's an animal, a mammal. Let's talk about the cow. Is an animal who has an important emotional intelligence, who is totally able to feel love and gratitude and to connect with others. He has this ability, just like a human does. But if you take a human and you have them, you raise them in a concentration camp without any kind of human contact or love, I mean, how will that person develop these qualities? No. And animals who are raised in an unhealthy environment, how can they develop these qualities? No. And there's a fundamental difference between a human being and an animal. A human being can look at the past and project himself into the future, allowing himself in this way to have to be aware and be clear about who they want to become. So how many actually use this to their favor? Often looking to the past and looking in our future is the cause of the chronic stress that we're living, because we're reliving traumas of the past and we're pre-living our future traumas. We're suffering from the past. We're anxious about the future. If this happens, if that happens, and if I take this, if I make this decision and this goes badly, oh, I need to choose my vacation. Oh, I like the mountains, but I like the sea. It's too hot, it's too cold, and we're suffering.
Ma vi pare normale?
Does it seem normal to you? Does it seem normal to suffer, or healthy to suffer for what kind of vacation we need to take? But this has to do with our ability to look at the past and look in the future. And when it is not used well, it generates anxiety and fear and stress. It's one of the most widespread conditions of today, this chronic stress. If we use this to our favor, it gives us something much more than other beings, projecting ourselves to the future, who we want to become, and using the future to have this, to generate this positive transformation accordingly. And animals don't have this ability. Maitreya, no matter how cute she is,
Questa capacità
apparently she doesn't have this. What's actually happening in her mind, I don't know. But as human beings, we have this ability. If we put ourselves together with all beings, living beings, and we added to that same category also all animals, including insects, the probability of being that turtle that's able to put his head through the buoy. And I don't want to create anxiety, and maybe a little bit of anxiety is created, but then we'll face it. We can face it. At a certain point, we die. I think it will happen to everyone.
Quante sono le possibilità?
What kinds of rebirths are possible? Even if we were able to be reborn as a human being, and that's not sure.
Non è uno scherzo.
We could be reborn also as an animal. Let's say that we were totally aware. Okay, let's say we were totally aware of and able to choose where we're going to be reborn. Really, let's say we had that ability. It's hard for us to choose where we want to go on vacation. So let's say to at least have the conditions that we have now. Where can I be reborn to have these same conditions? It's not obvious. And then if we add all the possibilities of if we add all the animals and insects, and I didn't even add all the beings that don't even have a human body, like hungry ghosts, etc. The probability that I have to have a rebirth like the one I have now, that probability is extremely, extremely low. So the question that comes is, how can I be sure to have a good continuity, a good rebirth? And this comes later. We look at that. It is possible. But for it to be possible, at least I need to recognize the preciousness of my life now, and not want to waste it, because these conditions are absolutely unique. Even looking at them in a religious sense, if we take all the prayers that are recited, there's a kind of category. Let's say, how many prayers have to do with health? How many have to do with winning the lottery? How many have to do with material problems? How many have to do with the relationships? In other words, how many prayers have to do with mundane problems, and how many actually have to do with this one spiritual transformation? We have prayers to become more patient and more loving. I mean, the majority, the majority is not about the spiritual. There was a film, I can't remember, with Jim Carrey, where I think it was like God for a Day, and he received all these requests. If we were to find ourselves in a position to receive all the prayers, how many have a real spiritual approach for developing oneself and their qualities to be able to help others? Very, very few. It's manageable. To say that having a religion doesn't mean being in these conditions. These conditions require having the minimum necessary, having access to a spiritual path and having the desire to follow that path. It's crazy, but it's incredibly rare to have all these conditions, and it's precious because it's what allows us to grow, and to grow spiritually, and to assure ourselves a positive continuity from life to life. So it's important for us to observe the conditions that we have and feel joyous, to feel joyful about these conditions that we have. Really recognize that we have won the opportunity. We have won the lottery. Instead you win the actual lottery. You just have a little bit more money. Now, how much is it? How much is the national lottery? A couple million. Someone says, okay, pick out a number. Now you've won 20 million. Are you happy? Don't tell me you're not. Obviously.
Noi quello che abbiamo oggi,
what we have today is worth much, much more. The term that's used in antique in antique text, it's said that the conditions we have today is worth more than the wish-granting jewels. So those make reference to fulfilling material needs. So today, maybe a couple billion would satisfy our material needs. Imagine with that, anything you want, materially speaking, you can have without any kind of effort. That's an objective of many. Having favorable conditions that we have today to have a sincere spiritual practice is worth much, much more, because even if you have a wish-granting jewel, you can't buy inner peace, you can't buy serenity, you can't buy joy, you can't buy satisfaction. You can't assure you a good old age or rebirth, an old age or a good death or a good rebirth. I've known very, very rich people, and I've never seen them as people being happier or more stable. The happy, stable, peaceful people that I've met are people who are able to really take advantage of the conditions that we have and put them into practice. So it seems like I'm just repeating and repeating, but we need to have this positive brainwashing with ourselves. Otherwise, we just keep taking for granted the conditions that we have. I repeat one more time. Why are we here today and not in the middle of war? Why are we here and not in a state of hunger, extreme sickness? I don't know. Some would say, oh, it's my good karma. No. In the sense that, oh, yes, but it's also the conditions, the conditions that are there. So certain conditions. When we imagine we're in a very difficult situation, between us and another person in a very difficult situation, the differences between us are not very many, because certain conditions can also appear and start a negative process that's hard to get out of. So I don't know if I want to talk about this, but let's, here, with a little bit of courage. I want to talk about this movie that I saw. When I saw it for about 10 days, it was hard. It was hard to watch, but it really shows us about the preciousness of this life that we have. It's a Spanish movie called, I think, The Platform. Or in Italian, I don't know, or the whole. I repeat, it's a film extremely heavy and violent, very strong, but helps us. It shows us clearly, graphically, what samsara is. Because what happens in this movie is this: they created this analogy. I don't know if they thought of samsara or not, but it works perfectly. Where there's a kind of prison, a palace of this building of 660 floors, and when you get into this prison, you're asked many questions. And they ask you what your favorite food is. This is one of the questions. And everyone who went there tells them what their favorite food is. And every day, in this kind of 666 floored palace, there are two people, and then there's this platform that comes down. And the top floor, there's a huge kitchen where they prepare the food, the favorite food of all the people who are there. And they put the platform in the middle, and it slowly comes down, and it stays a little bit for each floor. If you eat if you eat what your favorite food is, there's food for everyone. What happens? Those who are at the top, they're the first ones to access the food. They eat much more than they need, and as it goes down, there's just leftovers, and after a certain level, a certain number of floors, there's no more food. There's something interesting in this food. Every 30 days, the person wakes up on another floor. So maybe on the third, maybe you're on the so maybe one day you wake up and you're on the on the 20th floor, then the 300th floor, or the third floor. So the dynamic is, even having lived on the lower floors, they what happens is they don't learn from their own experience, and they just want to eat even more, and they don't care about the others. And this is the dynamic that we find ourselves in. So when we're in the higher floors, where we don't need to worry, I mean, really, how much do we worry about those who don't have the same opportunities that we have? And then one day, this life is over. One dies. We don't know where we're going to be reborn. It's like in ancient Greece, when laws were written. I don't remember exactly where. I heard it once. I know. Anyway, this not everywhere, but this specific part of ancient Greece. So when important laws were written, the lawmakers that needed to approve those laws, after they approved the laws, they were all killed. Why? Because they believed in reincarnation, and they didn't know what social class they would be reborn in. So they needed to write laws that were good for everyone. So to make sure that the laws were equal for all, they were killed at the end of after having renewed having rewritten those laws. So it was a way to assure that there was no corruption, or this attachment of one to oneself. These laws were equal for everyone. This film shows this aspect a little bit. The Spanish film, when we're in a privileged situation, and instead of taking advantage of this situation to really be well and help others, we try to take advantage of this situation as much as we can, not caring at all of other people, and we live our life. As long as I live, I just enjoy, and where I'm going to be reborn, where I'm going to wake up later, I'll worry about that later. So the difficult thing is, even when we see and we recognize this, it's still difficult to not fall into this banality of a comfortable survival, and difficult to really take advantage of the conditions we have. But when we really look around, I mean, the conflicts in the world, this tall building, what generates the suffering and the people who don't, is it the lack of food, or the lack of respect for others, the lack of love? If there were a minimum amount of consideration for others, where I take what is enough for me, and I mean, there would be enough for everyone, but that's not what we do. we take more than we need. So when we see in our own life what creates suffering in the world and the conflicts in the world, so not the lack of resources, but the lack of love, the lack of respect, the lack of awareness, compassion. It's an excessive selfishness, excessive self-cherishing. So when we're able to see this a little bit, what's the best thing that we can do to try to help this world be a better place? I need to try to become what the world needs. I need to try to act with love, compassion, with respect, with altruism, with gratitude. Because because the more I'm able to be like this, the more I'm able to influence others. And how can we make this life meaningful? It's not living it well and enjoying it, which is good also to enjoy one's life, but it's by using this opportunity that we have so that we can, with awareness, transform ourselves into the person that we think the world needs. If I'm able to use this opportunity that I have to gradually build myself into a person with more love, more patience, more awareness, more gratitude, with less hatred, less resentment, less selfishness, etc., then I'm doing the best not only for myself but for others.
Perciò ci sono tanti aspetti della nostra vita.
There are many aspects in our life, but every aspect, we come into contact and we transform ourselves. So recognizing the preciousness of this life is about using every moment in a useful way, every opportunity to transform ourselves. So we don't waste time. We don't think, oh, okay, well then I'll see, because what we have is unique. And it's strange because I'm convinced that on the other side, that suffering cannot be judged. And when you have everything, you suffer for small things. Have you ever suffered because you got a bad haircut? First, I used to make fun. I used to make fun of people who complained about their haircut, and once I was cutting my hair, but the razor, the haircut. As I was cutting my hair, I ran out of battery, and so my hair was all strange and half cut, and I really thought, okay, who am I? Who am I to make fun of people who are upset about a bad haircut? But then I got home and I was able to cut my hair better. But when we have everything, we make problems out of small things. When you're in a state of suffering, that suffering takes that person fully, even if apparently it's something unimportant. If we're not able to recognize the opportunity, the preciousness of this opportunity, our tendency will be to stay in this vicious cycles of victimizing ourselves and being angry, even with very unimportant, banal things, and won't allow ourselves to to take advantage of these opportunities that we have that would keep us from. So now let's just see a little bit what are these what are these characteristics that we have following. It's
la preziosa rinascita umana.
so
Poi ripeto, il termine originale non è
so
preziosa rinascita umana.
the term
È Deljor.
is Deljor.
Deljor vuol dire
Deljor
la libertà e
means the life of leisure and opportunity. So how to recognize these excellent, the identification of leisure, of opportunity. So it's when we translate it into a human rebirth, it seems like that's enough. But unfortunately, being human, that's just one of the conditions, but it's very, very far from being, from having these conditions of leisure and opportunity. So then we have, let's look at the 8 opportunities from Nagarjuna. It says, so there's
Nagarjuna scrive una lettera a un suo amico che era un re e dà dei consigli, no? Che è un testo di Dharma meraviglioso.
there's a
Riconoscere come una persona ha concezioni erronee. No, rinascere come una persona che ha concezioni erronee, come un animale, uno spirito famelico e negli inferni. In una regione dove non esistono gli insegnamenti del vittorioso, del Buddha.
So this is from these are the 8 conditions in the friendly letter from Nagarjuna. To be born with wrong views or without a conqueror's word, or as an animal or a hungry ghost or hell being, an uncultured person in a border region, a stupid and mute person, or a deity of long life. It's afflicted by one of the 8 faults that are conditions with lack leisure.
Vediamo insieme. Rinascere come una persona
You can
che
be
ha concezioni erronee.
can be born as a person with wrong views. So wrong views is a view where you have this strong idea that that what you do doesn't bring consequences. You just want to do what you want. Where you have views that bring to a violent, selfish conduct. So no matter how positive your external conditions are, if you have wrong views like this, you will suffer. So we could go into detail to what these erroneous views are, but it's the view that what I do today doesn't bring results tomorrow. So it doesn't matter. In every occasion, I try to take the best in that present moment without being responsible for my actions, because I don't think that my future is a result of my present actions. What's best for me is to receive momentary benefits. The law of the law of the sly one, of the stronger one. If I'm not aware of that the way I live today conditions my tomorrow, I end up acting by doing things that are very, very unhealthy, like stealing and etc. Is that clear? That brings also to lying, stealing, being violent, many other things. This is so we have the great fortune to be free from these wrong views. What about being born as an animal in the animal realm? Or, as we said before, the animal realm And in the animal realm, what's lacking is this ability to look in the past and look in the future. So one lives based on a reaction to that present happenings, which could be positive or negative, but one doesn't have this ability to transform one's mind looking back or looking forward. And in the animal realm, there's this constant fear for survival, fear of being eaten and killed. So one of the main characteristics of the animal realm is the excessive fear. Hungry ghosts, they're beings. It's interesting because the description of a hungry ghost, these are beings that would have the same potential as a human being on an intellectual, cognitive level, but they're taken by so much hunger and thirst that they don't think about anything other than eating or drinking. And when they're able to have food, they're not able to satisfy it because their throat is so small that the food doesn't even go through. They're not even able to nourish themselves even if they were to find food. Once, when I was receiving teachings on this in Tibet from Kachin Losan Punsok Rinpoche, the abbot of Tashi Lumpo, when he got to this explanation about the hungry ghost, and I brought him photographs of people on the planet who are in this extreme hunger, and it's exactly the same. These are people that are starving. They're starving. They're just skin and bones. The throat is very, very, very small, and their belly is swollen. So if you spend your whole life looking for food and you're not able to even satisfy yourself because there's so much fire in the belly, they just burn it right away, and it's even hard to get the food down, the nourishment down. Once I read a book that really touched me. It's very strongly touched me. It was the story of what happened in the years after the Second World War. Because we talk about the war, but once the end of the war is declared, then what happened? And when one of the most crazy story was that people who were extremely hungry. So what happens when you find someone who's hungry, extremely hungry, dying of hunger? You give them food, and what happened in that case was those people who were starving, literally starving, they would receive food, but they weren't able to digest that food because they hadn't eaten for so long, and that food activated so much pain, and they would die. And the researchers and doctors at the time, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. It took 2 years for them to develop a formula of how to help those people who were dying of hunger. Now we have this knowledge, but this description of these people who they would have the same abilities as a normal human being, but they don't have this ability to nourish themselves, and their lives are very, very long. Not because on your watch the time is longer, but when you're starving, the days are infinite, and when you're even able to find something to satisfy yourself, you're not able. And this is a reality that exists even today. And here it's called the realm of of hungry ghosts, and luckily we are not there either. And what about the hell realms? People might ask, it exists? Does it exist? Well, Shantideva explained that hell realms as a mental state. Once there was a story that touched me a lot. I'm going to share with you. It's a young girl who was just happened in the United States, and she was in a. This is a friend of a friend. So this girl was at school, and she was in high school, and she was in a science lab, and there was an accident, and she caught fire, and she was burned badly. And she got to the hospital. She was in a coma, and she was in coma for 10 days. When she came out of the coma, she was very frightened, and it was hard for her to speak and to get out of that fear that she was in. When she came out, when she was able to actually speak, she said that her experience in those 10 days was a nightmare that never finished, where she was raped and then burned, and then raped and then burned, and then raped and then burned again. A loop, this infinite loop. In the ancient texts, like here also, in the Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, is called a reoccurring hell, where you live a kind of nightmare, something with so much suffering that just keeps repeating itself. And from outside, she was in the hospital and she was being taken care of well. She was in, but that girl, did she live that suffering? How long did that last for her? 10 days? Lot longer. So this is an example of a hell realm. Unfortunately, there are many others. There are hell realms on this planet where people who apparently outside look well, but they live a crazy level of suffering that they can't get out of. There are also situations that are physically hellish, frighteningly difficult, and there are also situations where one dies and is reborn without a form body, but they live in a state of hell. So there's a reality. There's a hell realm where the reality is with a physical form or without a physical form. Why we're not in one of these hell realms, we don't know, but luckily we're not. You can also be born in a region where there are no Dharma teachings, where there's nothing that could take us towards a spiritual path. Someone who's born there, it becomes very difficult to find and develop one's spiritual path, and we're not there. So here it's lalo in Tibetan, uncultured person. It's a border region. It means a place very far from the Dharma, in a context where culturally life is completely far from spiritual life, where violence is acceptable, where there's no basis for a spiritual life, and we're not in those conditions. And here it says a stupid or mute person, but actually means being born with a a great state of sickness where you can have a very strong cognitive limit, or if you are very highly autistic, for example, or cognitive states where you're in a human body and marvelous states, but you don't have the physical conditions that allow to develop this awareness, and we're not in this situation either.
O se no rinascere come un essere divino di lunga vita.
Or you could be born as a Deva, a deity of long life. The Deva, there are Deva, and there are also human Devas. It's a realm where when one is born in that realm, there's just only pleasures. It's said that a Deva wants something, he imagines it and already feels the pleasure of that, that thing. It's said that one is very bright, where there's no sensation of hunger or thirst, where there's a constant state of pleasure with sexual union. All you need to do is look at another Deva, and you immediately can reach an orgasmic state. So someone who has this level of pleasure, how much space does one have to practice a spiritual path? Very little. But these beings, it's saying that towards the end of their lives, the last 7 days of their lives, they start losing those things, their own brightness and a bright complexion, or that natural pleasant scent of their own bodies, and they start losing all the pleasures around them, and even their lovers and friends don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. They start smelling badly, and they are also clairvoyant, so they're able to see where they're going to be reborn, and that positive karmic force that they used up as a Deva, they normally will be reborn in an inferior realm. So a human, for example, if they're born extremely wealthy, where there's no space to see oneself more deeply or see others, because you're just constantly enjoying your life, and then at a certain point their dream also ends, their life finished. So what happens? All or if they, or if they lose their money, then what happens? They, like the Devas, they're set apart. All the friends, they're not there at their side anymore, and they start seeing, okay, well, now I don't have those conditions anymore. I can't go to the hairdresser every day. It seems like nothing, but someone who really lived in that realm of the Deva, it's enormous. So what it means is that someone in that period of Deva, they didn't dedicate themselves for any kind of inner growth or development, and they became even more and more weak. And the day that they no longer have those conditions, they really fall into deep depression. And in ancient Greece also, there was this philosophy of the Stoics. And one of the things that was done is that people who were very, very rich, in their great villas, there was a part of their house, and that would be the house of a poor person without heating. And it wasn't there for the help. It was so that so that the owner of that great villa would also go and live in that poor house, with the intention of being well, not just with the material wealth, but also with a more modest living. And the owners of the villa, they wouldn't leave that a more modest living until they were satisfied with that life. It's to prepare themselves also for future lives. But normally, when someone's born in a God realm, do you have space to develop yourself? There are exceptions, but having a rebirth with extreme wealth, be it as in the human realm, like as a human, or in the God realm, it's not a good thing. So these are the 8 unfavorable conditions of which we are free. So when we talk about freedom, we're free from these unfortunate cases. So usually we give value to what we have. I mean, it's hard for us to give value for what we are free from. But just to give a very banal example, a few years ago, I twisted my ankle. It was terrible. And then I gave value to walking without pain. Oh, how beautiful that I can walk well. I don't have that pain. But when we get used to walking without pain, we don't rejoice for walking without pain, generally speaking. When we can see well, for example, do we feel the joy of seeing well? Once I had this opportunity to reflect on this when I had a diagnosis of an eye sickness. Luckily, it's very stable, but if it weren't, has this tendency of degenerating, and one would need to do like a corneal transplant. But luckily, it's stable. But that first year, after I had that diagnosis, there was a moment I said, "Oh, okay." Even my auntie, she had this problem. It was very serious. It could happen, and I started imagine what it would be like if I couldn't see. And then you open your eyes and you take a book. Oh, how I'm so lucky! How lucky I am that I can read, that I can see, and I don't take for granted. But I don't know why, but it's enormously difficult for us to not take for granted the beautiful things that we have. But it's an exercise for us to celebrate, to know the beauty of the things that we have, but also the things that we are free from. I don't have a serious illness. I'm not in jail. I'm not in a hell realm. I'm not in the hungry ghost realm. I'm not in the middle of war. I'm not in extreme poverty. There's an infinite number of negative situations of which I'm free, and that's not nothing. But then, we take it for granted until those conditions are no longer there for us, and then we say, now what are we going to do? For many years, for example, I had this marvelous opportunity of being close to my masters and very, very special people. At a certain point, these people physically were no longer there, which is normal. And so people who were always there for me, they just weren't physically. The problem is not that it ends. The problem is not taking advantage of taking advantage of the conditions when they're there. I mean, the fact that we're all here together, it's not obvious. And it's marvelous.
Quindi non è la paura che
So it's not the fear that it's going to end, it's the joy that it's here. And it's fundamental for us to know how to list and the blessings that we have, the inner things, the inner blessings we have as well, and these freedoms that we have. We have this ability of being together, talking about the Dharma, because we are not in situations that the majority of people are in. We have this freedom. And I repeat, this doesn't make us better than anyone else. It makes us lucky. So how can I use this for my spiritual path?
ogni tanto qualcuno può magari dire, pensare
Every once in a while, someone say, "Oh, thinking about these things is sad." There's this side that really touches us, like the movie I talked about before, the whole Il buco in Italian. It's not a pleasant experience. I can assure you. It's a really well-made movie, but it's not a pleasurable experience to watch it. But there are moments where we need to be shaken. There are moments where we need to say, wake up. What are you doing? Where are you? Look where you are. Because it's there's no joke. I mean, the conditions that we have. And we can even the mere fact of saying, "Oh, I tried to eat organic food." How many people have this opportunity of eating organic food? Have this opportunity to this choice of eating healthier food? You tell me. Oh, everyone should eat organic food. Well, thank you. Let's create the conditions. We need to change the social structure of our entire planet. I mean, so I have an opportunity that not everyone has. So even just taking care of your own health, that's already a condition that very, very, very few have. The awareness that there are unhealthy dynamics in our lifestyle, and not being slave of these dynamics, like, for example, being slave to your cell phone, being able to recognize this. This is for very, very few people. The point is not about being. It's not about suffering because there are people who suffer. It's about seeing the unique opportunity that we have, and that somehow it's
cercare di utilizzarle al meglio.
And it would be like a lack of respect. It would be like a lack of recognition for those who don't have these conditions, to not use them, because we have these opportunities and we can be part of the solution. if we have these and we don't take advantage of them, it's really showing a total lack of consideration for those who don't have these. I don't want to put the weight on anybody's shoulders. Maybe yes, but the problem in this moment is made mostly from those who have these opportunities and don't know how to take advantage of these opportunities compared to those who don't have these opportunities. Because those of us who have these conditions, we could make it better for others. If on my floor I eat what I need and I respect others, everybody would have. Instead, no. So, even as a sense of responsibility, it's right for us to recognize the opportunity that we have, the precious conditions that we have, and celebrate, rejoice, and say, "Oh, how wonderful!" And say, "Oh, thank goodness I'm not in that situation." But we also need to use it, not take it for granted, and pay homage to it by being part of the solution, love, gratitude, wisdom, awareness, peace in our life, in our conduct. To not allow ourselves simply to be taken by a wave of anger and hatred and ignorance, everything we see around us. We shouldn't go against anyone, but we should go against the current. What current? The current of a superficial life, the current of selfishness, of the current of resentment and anger and dissatisfaction. Go against all of this, and by doing that we make this life meaningful. So now we'll stop for lunch, and we conclude with this part, which are called the 8 freedoms, and they're only listed 8. Of course there are much more than 8. So Nagarjuna talked about 8, and so they stayed 8. But actually, there are 80, even more. But there's a lot of coherence in the Buddhist teachings. There are many disastrous scenarios of which we're free, and we should say, "Oh, okay. I don't know how, but I'm free from all of this. Thank goodness." And then we'll go on to the next part, which is about recognizing our endowments. So we're not just free from these disastrous situations, but we also have marvelous things. And for this, I just wanted to just give more emphasis again. So this precious human rebirth, in my opinion, is wrong, because it's not it's really about recognizing our life of leisure and endowments, of which there's also being born as a human being. But being born as a human being is not enough. I know that these teachings leave a little bitterness in the mouth, and that's right. It's so that we can feel, to be able to say, wow, why I'm so lucky, I don't know. I mean, much better than having won the lottery. Just look at the people that we know, even our friends, our family, our acquaintances. How many of them actually try to make their life meaningful use their life as a means for inner growth, to be really part of the solution and not the problem.
Non è la maggioranza.
It's not the majority. Just take that and multiply it. And I repeat, it doesn't make us superior to others. It makes us people who have conditions that are superior, that are marvelous, but we don't know how long they're going to last. So we take these conditions that we have and we make them useful right away. Or we say, okay, yes, I recognize this wonderful condition, but now I need to do this. I need to do this, that, and the other, and watch the news and do that. And then time goes by, and then it's done. It's over. You need to be careful to not let this to happen. So one realizes the preciousness of this life when one thinks about it, and when one thinks about it and one gets some goosebumps and one feels tension in one's gut, and one feels, oh, I'm so lucky, wow, and this urgency comes because life is made up of every moment, every instant. It's not somewhere else. Life is right here. It's here now, and we need to use it here the best way possible. And someone asks, well, I like to start my Buddhist practice. Where should I start? The first step, rely correctly on a spiritual guide. Want to grow spiritually. Second step, generate awareness with the preciousness of the conditions that we have today. This is a fundamental step that we need to take along the path. Then we can recite mantras, do visualizations. There are an infinite number of things to do, but at the basis, to be able to do all of that, we need to recognize the preciousness, the precious conditions that we have. Really, in your belly, you feel it, where you feel that you cannot waste any time. It's too precious to waste.
Non lo so, potrei fare tantissimi esempi.
We could give so many examples.
Solo uno, e con questo
I'm just going to give you one and then we can conclude. I received as a gift a tea that is really, really good. It's a Chinese tea. The Pu'arashu. It's cooked. It's really particular, delicious. Many years old. It's delicious. So what happens is when I drink that tea,
uno non lo molla lì a metà.
you know, you don't leave the cup. You don't leave it halfway. You just keep adding water until you've used it all up, because you don't know when you're going to be able to have tea like that again. Only once when I was in Beijing, by chance I was able to buy delicious tea like this. So this man was so kind with me, and every two was. This man was so kind to me. This man was so kind to me because the temple was closed, and I came there, and he gave me a teapot, all sorts of things. I said, "Oh, he's being so kind. He's letting me taste all these teas. Okay, I'll take these teas." And I ended up buying these $250 teas. So when you have this tea that is so delicious, do you prepare everything? You drink half of it and then you just leave it? No, you have to make sure you don't have any. You make sure that you're not busy. You choose the right water, because Um, um, so the taste of the water changes the taste of the tea. For example, when we were in the high mountains of Mongolia with the pure water, the tea was amazing. So when you're drinking this very fine tea, every moment is a pleasure. You give value to that experience. At a certain point, if they give me another 20 kilos of that same precious tea, then okay, I drink half of it. I mean, you just don't give the same value to it. So we have an opportunity in our life every moment. It's a level of preciousness that is absolutely unique. If we wanted to buy it, we wouldn't even know where to start. So health you can't buy, for example. Healthy human relationships you can't buy. The contact with the Dharma, the pleasure of following this path cannot be bought. So this is being a human being with these conditions. You cannot buy these conditions. They're extremely, extremely rare, extremely precious. Extremely rare and precious. So let's try to give the right amount of value and reflect on it and generate this inner feeling, that warmth that says, wow, this is no joke. This is unfortunately, we need to repeat this many, many times because this is what gives us the basis to really make our life meaningful, to grow, really grow in the Dharma. And this is what allows us to not fall in the trap of the comfortable spiritual life, which is, I'm fine because I'm Buddhist. No. I need to put myself in the game. I need to face my negativities and get out of my comfort zone. I really need to work. So we recognize the preciousness of what we have is a fundamental step. Then we'll look at the 18 endowments, and then we'll look at the next step if we have time. And once we've recognized the preciousness of this human rebirth, we work on the certainty of death and the uncertainty of the moment of death. So I have a unique opportunity. How long is it going to last? I don't know. I mean, the problem is not dying. The problem is not taking advantage of this opportunity that we have. And when I want to do that, then it's just over. This is the next step. And there's no hurry to get there. Let's feel and really feel this preciousness. So it's time for our dedications now.
Sashi peke chushe meto chan rirab lingshe nide gembadi sange shindu mikte ulwargi drogu namda shingla che parasho jetsun lame kutse raptenchi namkaratinle chokchur gepada losan tempe dremes Münsel taktu ne gyurchi yidama guru radna mindrala kam niryata yami. Nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshin. Ninsen taktu delekpe kuncho sumki chingelo. Kuncho sumki ngodrubot sol. Kuncho sumki trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings.
May it help us to achieve all realizations and spring all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Oma hon temba lame sangye rinpoche kyoba lame tamcho rim drimba lame gendo rinpoche kyamne kuncho sumla chopa. Buon appetito.
Have a good lunch. Thank you, everyone. We'll see each other at 3:30, whatever the program says.